All right, it's a pleasure to kick things off today. My name's Adam Anger. I'm a Ross alum based here in New York City, BBA 1996. It's so great to be here and chat with a few folks and feel the Michigan spirit, the Wolverine pride. I'm proud to represent the Alumni Board of Governors. For those of you who don't know, this is a group of about 30 alumni that work closely with the alumni office at the School of Ross. Really advising on how alumni can engage with the school, working with the dean as well to engage with students, faculty, and connect the alumni to the school at large. I was just on campus last week, and I don't know how many of you engage with students at the school. Raise up hands. It's just such a pleasure to connect with students and kind of hear what they're dealing with, give them a little bit of coaching and inspiration as to the path they're going to be on. I had a chance to do some mentoring, to host a bit of a fireside chat. And then we met with a lot of the departments to just discuss how the alumni can engage with the school a little bit more closely. So if you're eager to learn a little bit more about this board, please see me after and we'll have a chance to mingle and chat about it. So we are in for a treat today. And it's my honor to be able to tell you why by introducing the two folks who are going to be in the spotlight. Let me first of all start with the new Edward J. Frey Dean of Business, Sharon Matusik. Dean Matusik joined us on August 1st this year, coming from the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado Boulder. First-generation college student, Dean Matusik earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and English with an honors at the Colby College. She also earned a PhD in Strategic Management from the University of Washington School of Business Administration. And as an academic leader, has a really strong track record of an amazing accomplishments in quite a few areas. Student success, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also really engaging the community. And I can tell you by firsthand experience, she's already had the Wolverine injection, the Wolverine spirit injection. Go Blue rolls off the tongue, just like we all like to hear. So I'm sure she'll chat with you a little bit more about that. Also, we have with us Mr. Daniel Och, who, in addition to having a quite accomplished business career, is a committed philanthropist who serves on several charitable boards, including the Robin Hood Foundation and the New York Presbyterian Hospital, where his foundation has funded the world-class Och Spine program. And also, Mr. Och currently spends most of his time focused on investments and activities around philanthropy efforts include through his family office, Willoughby Capital Holdings, and his private foundation, the Jane and Daniel Och Family Foundation. Mr. Och holds a Bachelor of Science in Finance from the Wharton School of Business, and is an avid art collector and investor, and also skier. So we have to talk about your favorite ski destinations. But anyway, without further ado, it's quite an honor to introduce these two, welcoming you both to the stage, and looking forward to the talk this evening. Thank you.
First of all, thanks for coming to Ann Arbor.
My pleasure.
Boulder's a good place to be, and we're really excited to have you. Tell us a little bit, your journey. How you got to academia. Why did you decide to pursue a career in academia?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start even a step back. So you heard I'm a first generation college student. So my dad worked on an assembly line at General Motors, of all places, making locomotive engines. And my mom grew up in an immigrant family. And she was actually valedictorian of her high school. She's a great violinist, and she was offered a partial scholarship to Northwestern. I grew up outside of Chicago. And her father told her that women don't go to college. So, my parents worked really hard to make sure my sister and I had the opportunities that they didn't have for themselves. And I think because of that, that's why I've really valued education. It was hard. There was a semester I had to drop out of school because we didn't have enough money and earn some extra cash to help pay for my college. But to me, boy, my life is so different than the life I grew up with. And to have the opportunity to help others open up opportunities for themselves through education is just a really powerful and meaningful job. I think I have the best job in the world. Like Mary kept talking about how she has the best job. I'm like, I think I actually have the best job. But, so to be in the field of education was just something that's deeply meaningful to me. And in terms of my path to get here, so I worked in consulting after I graduated from undergrad. My main goal was to have a decent job that I could pay my rent and get a car and all that good stuff. And I enjoyed that a lot, and as I reflected on, do I want to keep on that path or go down a different path? I started thinking about what did I like most about that job? And I knew I liked the education piece because I did a fair bit of corporate training as part of that job. But then to me, it was always really interesting how you could have two companies trying to do the same thing, and one company be really successful, another company not so much. And so I kind of figured out that if I got a PhD, I could study that all day long. So I think that combination of reflecting on that research piece and then like answering questions that people didn't have answers for, that idea about education, and then reflecting on what a big impact education had been on my life is what led me down this path.
Well, I totally get what you're talking about in terms of the excitement and energy. We used to manage a lot of money for institutions, and I used to love going to college campuses because you could just feel the energy and enthusiasm. And now you're getting that in spades. And when we're talking about your background, I thought your PhD is so interesting that because most PhDs are in something very specific, and it's interesting, but you just drill deep. And the concept of trying to understand what makes one company successful and the other not successful, you can apply that any and everywhere. So probably a good segue into the Ross School of Business.
Yes.
What are the things, look, great institution, incredibly successful, great alumni, but I'm sure coming in, you've thought about, what are the goals for the next 5 years? And, how do you think about what are the changes? What are the kind of things that you're focusing on to make sure the school stays at the top and make sure everyone gets the best opportunities?
So I would say a couple of things. First, what attracted me to Ross in the first place, I think, is a big piece of that answer. To me, Ross has always been a place of big ideas and action. When I reflect on my academic career, some of the biggest ideas that came out of the field of strategy were Ross alums, from Ross faculty, excuse me. So, some of you here probably know like the resource-based view, C.K. Prahalad, Birger Wernerfeld, like those people came out of Ross. And that's just my field. And it's that excellence really across the school that is so powerful. And actually, my first dean in my first academic position was a guy by the name of Gil Whitaker, who had been dean. I mean, some of you who've been around a little bit might have had him as your dean. So he had been dean at the business school. He had been a provost at Michigan, and then he went to Rice University, which was my first academic job. And he was all about big ideas and action-based learning, which, obviously we associate with the Ross School. So I think that combination of seeing my field being led by some of the really powerful ideas coming out of Michigan Ross, and then having exposure to someone who had really taken the business school to the next level at Michigan and was doing the same thing at Rice, which was his alma mater and where he met his wife and things like that. Boulder's a nice place to live. There are very few places I would have left for, but to me, because Michigan has that, just that focus on big ideas and action learning, that's what really attracted me. And in terms of my plans for the next 5 years, well, I'm about 40 days into the job, so I don't know that I have the 5-year plan yet. As most of you would probably do, my first 100 days is really focused on listening and learning, some of the things that are emerging themes. When I reflect on what do I want for the school, what do I think all of you as alums and friends of the school want, I think that, we want to be perceived, without a doubt as one of the most elite business schools in the world, Michigan, Harvard, Stanford. How do we differentiate ourselves from some of those really great institutions? One of the things, if you think about like the Stanfords and the Harvards, they're kind of islands unto themselves. And I think some of the power of Michigan, and we see it in terms of the energy that's here tonight, is that it's this amazing institution that has deep academic excellence across the school. So it's not just the business school as an island unto itself, but it's that whole University of Michigan. One of the tidbits that a more experienced dean shared with me when I started at Ross was that there's something like 110 departments that are in the top 10. Wow. Isn't that really amazing? And then I reflect on the challenges and opportunities that are ahead of us as a society. For the most part, those are not the kinds of opportunities that are going to be solved by very narrow areas of knowledge. They're the kinds of problems, think about climate, think about all of the issues associated with that. You need to pull together people with different kinds of expertise to solve these complex problems. If they were easy to solve, we would have solved them already. So when I think about what Michigan brings to the table, when I think about what the world needs as we look out 5-10 years, to me, I feel like Michigan is so well positioned for the future. So I hope to be able to leverage that. I care a lot about innovation and entrepreneurship, which I think is part and parcel of that. My geographic journey, as you mentioned, my undergrads, I grew up in Chicago. My undergrads from a liberal arts college in Maine. I lived in a lot of the technology and entrepreneurship hubs, Boston Route 128 area, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and then my PhDs from Washington up in Seattle. So that focus on innovation, I think, is just so important in terms of preparing our students to be successful over the long term. So that's another area that I think is really important. And then all things ESG, when I talk with alumni, when I talk about business leaders, just how do we think about environmental sustainability? How do we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those sorts of things. There's so much that's already going on in those areas that I hope to elevate that as well.
Great. Well, the one thing you talked about, and you alluded to it now, was the idea of getting the business school closer to the engineering school, and creating, those opportunities for students to come together. Maybe talk a little bit about what that really means, how are you going to do that, and what kind of buy-in you get, and is it actual classes and programs together? Or
It's a great question. And, some of you who know a little bit about my background know that one of my big initiatives at University of Colorado was a partnership between the School of Business and the School of Engineering. One thing that Colorado had is the buildings were very close together. So we built a new building that actually joined them, and we had a big innovation and entrepreneurship hub space in the center. But I think those same basic ideas, there is more geographic distance. Those of you who remember your days on campus know that the engineering school is not that close to the business school. But I've heard the engineers all live near the business school. So get them on their way to class. But I think, certainly classes and bringing students together where it makes sense in terms of capstone projects, entrepreneurial projects, innovation-based projects, I think is a natural area to build out in more detail. And we've already have some of the foundations of that. But I think a lot of the activities that go on outside of the classroom are equally, maybe even more important. So I think about, for example, new venture planning competitions and things like that. The teams that are often the most successful in those initiatives are the ones that have a few engineers and a few business students, and they're actually working together to build something where they think it might have a future. They're really forced is not the right word. They're really incented to work closely together to bring out the best of each other. So I think those are some really natural opportunities. So things that happen outside of the classroom where you're working together towards a shared goal. I think there's some really great opportunities to build out those kinds of programs.
Right. Well, in the old days, it was like the after-class investment club, but now the world's changing. And as you said, 110
Amazing.
Departments in the top 10, and some big ones, right? The whole medical facility is amongst the best in the world, and there's a lot of opportunity. And there are more business opportunities in healthcare on the entrepreneurial level than there used to be.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that could?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I love about being in Michigan. The medical campus is right here also. So building out those bridges, because, I do think being able to take ideas, we have amazing scientists and researchers. How do we take some of those best ideas and commercialize them and make sure they get out in the world? And there's different ways to do that. Like not all faculty want to be entrepreneurs, and that's good because we like them to do that basic science research. But that's where I think the business school can play a big role in terms of, say you've got a really good idea and you have to build a business around it. Well, that requires some business skills. And so being able to think about how do we connect with those foundational ideas and help shepherd those through engaging students, through engaging people from our alumni community, those are ways that I think we can make a real difference in terms of getting some of those really amazing breakthrough scientific research ideas out into the world.
Right. They say that students today, young people today, care about social goals. They care about the values of the company. They care about climate. They care about other issues. Is that really happening? And do they really care? And is it driving companies?
Boy, I think they do really care. I think students, maybe things will change when the labor market is not so tight, but, students are looking to work someplace where they feel that the organization shares their values. And I think this creates a lot of different dynamics for people running organizations, because back in the day, you could just do the business of business and you didn't have to worry about taking a stand on a lot of issues. And more, what I hear when I'm out in the community is people talking about it's a different game, and also on the entrepreneurial side where, the founder is the company to such a large degree, people are looking at what are their social media posts, what are their positions on things. So, I do think that creates a different kind of landscape. And I also think that sometimes there can be sort of a false dichotomy between you're in it for the money or you're in it for a social purpose, and they're not the same thing. And I think there's many, many, many great examples of where those things can coexist and actually reinforce each other. And I think that's what we hope for, many people who are leading companies into the future, that there's an awareness of, not just the economic impact, but also the other externalities associated with that. And making a few decisions in a slightly different way that creates both economic as well as social value, and that it's not an either or. And one of the things that I hope we are always able to do at the Ross School with our students is help them understand the nuances of those decisions, and that oftentimes things that might seem black and white on the surface are actually a bit more nuanced.
And I hate to use the initials because DEI and ESG, are those things that you actually teach as part of a curriculum, or is it something that the faculty has to just include? How do you get that to work?
Gosh, that's such a big question. So let me take that into two pieces.
You got a big job now. You got a big platform. Let me
take that into two pieces. Well, so with DEI, yes, we teach it, right? If you think about what we know from the research, we know that mixed gender leadership teams tend to have better innovation performance, financial performance, fewer gender pay gaps, things like that. So there's a lot of ways that we want our students to understand that when you have different kinds of perspectives around the table, we know empirically that leads to positive outcomes. And so, part of it is making sure people are aware of that. And then how do you teach it? Well, it's something that there's two ways to think about it. One is the deep, and one is the integrated. So we do have, special experiences and classes that deal with these issues explicitly. And, there's also points throughout the curriculum where you're drawing on some of these ideas because you don't want people to think, it's just a DEI issue. You want it infused in terms of how people look at different decisions. And then ESG, so E is environment, S social. Does that cover DEI?
You probably got a sense that the Michigan alumni, it's probably the best in the country. You've seen it like at events.
I believe it. I believe it.
It just is. I married into it, so I saw it. It is. You wear a hat, you say "Go Blue," you made a friend anywhere in the world. I know you're early in your tenure, but what do you see in terms of opportunities to use the Michigan alumni, to guide the business school, to help with recruitment? How's that going to play out?
Boy, I think the alumni community is so important. I think when you reflect on what students get from their experience at the Ross School, it's absolutely that great experience in the classroom, and our faculty are fantastic. But an important component of that is how we connect to the community through the alumni network, through all of you who meet with students, sponsor treks in your offices, all of those different ways that you connect make a huge difference in the experience that the students have. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Ross is this action-based learning model that cuts through our undergrad curriculum, it cuts through our graduate curriculum. But a lot of that means our students are off doing projects like starting funds, starting businesses, and they're working with you in your companies and your organizations as part of that. So that's really critically important. And then also, that's one of the great benefits of being a graduate of the Ross School is you have access to this amazing, highly accomplished, highly engaged alumni network. We have, I think, over 55,000, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got over 55,000 Ross alums in the world. So no matter where your career takes you, there's someone to say, "Go Blue." And I think that's a really attractive element in terms of the Ross education.
So you said in the world, and that actually leads to the next question. I think stereotypically, Harvard and Stanford have a reputation of being very international in every way, shape, or form, and some other business schools do not.
Yeah.
Are there plans to increase Ross's profile internationally?
Gosh, you're reading my mind. Absolutely. And I do think that's an area we can do more. I think we tend to be a bit Midwest in our values, and I say that as someone who grew up outside of Chicago, so I say that as a compliment. But we do good work, and we expect people to notice, and sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to get the word out. I think there is a lot of opportunity for us to raise our global impact and our global visibility. If there's one thing that we've learned over the last few years is how interconnected we are globally. So, to me, I think there's two components. One is making sure our students are, they understand that we live in a globally interconnected world, and they feel like they have the skills to thrive in a globally interconnected world. And then the flip side of that is making sure that, the CEO of a global organization that's based in London or based in Mumbai, when he or she is thinking of the top business schools in the world, I want that person to think of Michigan, Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. So how do we do that? And that's TBD, but I do think that's really important, and I do think there's a lot we are doing that we need to draw more attention to, and we need to make sure our students are prepared to thrive in a world where those interconnectivities are part and parcel of everyday life.
Right. How do you like living in Ann Arbor?
I love it. I have to say, I have two daughters, an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. My husband's also an academic. My 18-year-old is a senior in high school, so she stayed back with my husband in Boulder. So I miss my husband and my daughter. But other than that, I'm having a great time in Ann Arbor.
That's great. And last question. How many points are we going to beat Ohio State by this year?
I don't know the answer to that, but I hope a lot. And also, I will say I'm taking special interest in the Michigan State game. So some of you who watch the intricacies of coaches in high school, in college football, might know that Mel Tucker was a coach at Colorado for a year. And then he left to go to Michigan State because they paid him, $95 million. Go figure. But so I really want to be Mel Tucker.
I'm sure you will. Any parting words you want to leave the
Well,
crowd?
you know, I'm going to leave with Go Blue, right?
sure.
Yeah. But thank you all for coming. You know, I'm so grateful to you and Jane for all of your engagement and the amazing impact that you're having on our students. And, you know, let's get every student to see your interview with Mary, because I think you both did a phenomenal job of talking about all the cool things that a finance career can do for you, and also how important it is to work for someone who has, you know, that energy to drive an organization forward in a way that brings out your best selves. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming to Ross in Ann Arbor. Great. We're very lucky to have you.